I'm going to be starting on Chapter 8 of a book called Black Death at the Golden Gate. It's about a Black Plague outbreak in San Francisco at the turn of the century. Chapter 8 is titled An Infamous Compact. The room was filled with empty seats. On January 26, 1901, three graying scientists stared out into an elegant ballroom at the Occidental Hotel in San Francisco. The men had traveled across the continent, having been appointed by officials in Washington to serve on a commission for the purposes of ascertaining the existence or non-existence of bubonic plague in the city of San Francisco. As a show of transparency for their inquiry, they had pledged to hold open meetings at the hotel every morning at 11 o'clock, where anyone with information to share or an interest in the proceedings could take a seat. At their first meeting, they gazed out upon only a handful of spectators. Sitting at a long table in front of the room were Simon Flexner, the professor of pathology at the University of Pennsylvania, Frederick Novoy, an assistant professor of bacteriology at the University of Michigan, and Lowell's Barker, a professor of anatomy at the University of Chicago. All had first-hand experience of the disease in India. Flexner and Barker, in addition, had independently sailed to the Philippines and Hong Kong and evaluated the methods doctors used in treating plague victims there. Though he did not have a personal relationship with any of them, Kenyon was well aware of their professional reputations and considered them his peers. He had chosen a life of academic study over the treatment of patients in the Marine Hospital Service. He could have very well been sitting in their spots, his rough edges perhaps sanded away by the assurance that he was respected. As the lone bacteriologist in the group, it was Novoy who instead represented the coming age of laboratory science. Kenyon hoped that the man's high reputation and professional air would make the Commission's findings unassailable, even as Novoy followed the same techniques and procedures that he had followed in his laboratory on Angel Island. Privately, Novoy had his doubts. The governor of California denies the existence of the disease in San Francisco, he wrote in a letter to his wife Grace shortly after arriving in the city. The press and people are unanimously against the idea that plague exists here. The newspapers and governor feel that they must not be guided by bacteriological evidence. They will in the end lambast us just as they have done to Kenyon should we find plague. The presence of more outsiders was the last thing Governor Gage wanted. Before the commission members arrived, the Occidental Medical Times, the most powerful medical journal on the West Coast, announced that doctors outside San Francisco considered their work above reproach and were prepared to accept their findings without question. They are men whose knowledge and integrity are beyond impeachment by the chief executive or the newspapers of this state, and we trust that their verdict will settle for all times the most disgraceful, most pitiable, and the most humiliating chapter in the medico-political history of California, it noted in an editorial. The commission members, meanwhile, were determined to make the same mistakes as Kenyon, and focused on presenting a humble, open face to the city. "We are now at work seeking only the truth," Barker said during the first meeting with the press. Governor Gage tried to stifle the inquiry before it began. After officials in Washington named the commission officers, he sent a wire to President McKinley complaining that he had not been allowed a hand in selecting its members. "I hope that in this matter of vital interest to the people of California there is no intentional discourtesy," he wrote. Unable to pack it with doctors he considered allies, the governor announced that he would not accept the commission's findings unless they could produce living patients with the disease, a feat that had long eluded Kenyon. When the commission members arrived in San Francisco and began searching for laboratory space, Governor Gage ordered the president of the University of California to deny them use of facilities on campus and refused to meet with them in person, believing that by denying them recognition he could undercut their authority. The doctors were forced to turn an empty office in City Hall into a makeshift laboratory, purchasing microscopes and other vital equipment on the fly. Though Kenyon offered supplies and assistance, the commission officers rejected him, not wanting the appearance of association that could later be used to cast doubt on their work.